It's time for another episode of Pathway to the Podium. I have been greatly looking forward to our guest today, Formula One commentator Nelson Valkenburg, who does the Dutch commentary for Viaplay Netherlands. He's extremely knowledgeable on all things motorsport related and is a frequent guest of the Race F1 podcast, as well as Nailing the Apex. Nelson, thank you so much for coming on.
Absolutely, no problem.
So, first of all, you're in Miami right now. We have the Miami Grand Prix. The hiatus is almost over. It's been an extremely long 5 weeks. What have you been doing in this interim?
Some documentary work, a lot of interviews to wrap up the production for 2 documentaries that we're doing at Viaplay in the Netherlands. And we were lucky to have the rights, the broadcasting rights to the NLS Championship. So we've been following Max on his exploration of GT racing. So I've been doing some endurance commentating as well.
That's really cool. And you're also calling the 24-hour race, correct?
Yeah, that's next up after this. So looking forward to that.
Yeah, that's perfect timing too with Verstappen. I mean, obviously, let's start with Max because, I mean, he is so huge. He's so synonymous with the Netherlands. Can you just describe to our American audience here how large of a role Max Verstappen is in your country?
Well, he's the biggest sporting star that we have, without a doubt. F1 was always a reasonably popular sport in the Netherlands, but when he came around, he changed the game completely, and everybody suddenly became an F1 fan. The bandwagon grew year in, year out as he started to win more races, but when in 21 he took his first world title, it really exploded. We took over the rights in 22, and we've been on this ride with him as well over the last 4 or 5 years. And yeah, there is no bigger sports personality in the Netherlands, in a country that is obsessed by sports.
Mm-hmm.
He is the biggest.
There's been a lot of speculation, of course, whether or not Verstappen could leave Formula One. I personally would put it at a coin flip, which clearly would not be good for anyone involved with Formula One. Where would you put it at right now, percentage-wise, if you had to put it, guess?
It's a dangerous question because it relies on me being able to look into the head of a world champion. What's been clear is that he's been really trying to get his point across, and in that comes the threat of him leaving, and it would be a problem for F1 if your biggest stars, and although he didn't take the world championship last year, it arguably was his best year last year. If your stars feel like they are pushed out, and F1 has been very susceptible to that narrative, and we've seen some changes. There are more changes to come. There is a push underneath it all to see if they can make the drivers a little happier. Max is the most vocal, but basically every driver on the grid shares his views on the current regulation set and what it does to their driving style and experience. So I have a feeling he'll stay, but you can't really quote me on it, although we're doing a podcast, because I don't know. It's just a feeling. But he will create more room for himself to say what he thinks, try to change the sport for the better, and maybe even create some room to keep doing what he's doing now and doing alternative forms of motorsports to make sure that every bit of his competitive sense is being tickled.
Well, I mean, he has a ton of pedigree, of course, and with that comes additional opportunities to speak out. And I think he's doing that, and rightly so, in my opinion, at least. Let's talk about the rules since you brought it up. Obviously, this is a really, really big year when it comes to rule changes with Formula One. This has garnered a ton of discussion here. We don't need to go on and on about it, but I already know your stance here. But Nelson, if you could, you and I are both kind of purists. Could you please quickly just dive into how you feel this iteration of F1 compares to the previous one and what changes could possibly be made moving forward to kind of solve the issues right now at hand?
So, for a bit of context, the rules came about in a political period where it was clear that car manufacturers weren't going to sell a ton of cars that weren't at least hybrid or probably mostly EVs. So F1 had tried to latch on to that to stay relevant. What they've done is create a regulation set where it's basically 50-50 from the combustion engine to the electrical package. And that creates a hybrid system of about 1,000 horsepower. But the technical challenge to achieve that has been so great, and the constraints on technology and some choices that have been made have created a situation where the cars and the teams are a little bit energy starved on track. They can't go full out for a full lap with the battery power that is available. And that has created not only a bad look for F1, but very unhappy drivers because they have to manage their energy situation. Now, over the last few weeks, as this came to a head, as Max, as other drivers were pushing for some changes have been implemented. So we'll see a reduction in output from the battery that will, if you put less energy there, you'll have a longer period of energy available, which would take away some of the problems. There's some other mitigation there, basically to make sure that what happened to Oliver Behrman, for instance, in Japan doesn't happen again, where he comes across a driver that has no battery power and the closing speeds are so extreme that we have a dangerous situation. For the next year, there is a lot of talk about creating a new combustion engine where the balance is not 50-50 from combustion engine and battery power, but perhaps 70-30 or 65-35. That will need some more political wrangling because not all of the engine manufacturers are on board. But if they get to that point with a little bit of extra fuel pumping through the engine, then I think most, if not all, but most of the issues most of the drivers have will be addressed to a certain extent. It won't be as pure as you and I may want it to be, where it's only about braking late, getting your turn in correct, finding your position, your moment to go on throttle, and that's the way you drive. But a lot of people, including me, will have to accept that the world is changing, and motorsport in that respect has changed as well. You see it in IndyCar as well with the inclusion of the hybrid system. Racing has changed there as well, but I just feel that we've gone one, maybe two steps too far in F1, and they're trying, with all the political wrangling that's included in that, to reel it in a bit.
Yeah. I think in particular what you mentioned there with the Ollie Behrman crash when he had to take evasive action to avoid Colapinto. Unfortunately, that's one of those things in which there's some irony involved, in which typically in order for there to be true change, unfortunately something kind of bad has to happen. And I guess the good thing was that it wasn't a too horrific crash. I mean, that could have been much, much worse if that were a different circuit. If that were a street circuit, that could have been really terrible. But that at least really got the discussion going even more so that, hey, this isn't just drivers being unhappy. This is also a true safety issue. So that kind of kickstarted conversations. And then, of course, the fact right now that we had this 5-week hiatus because of the Bahrain Grand Prix and the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix getting canceled because of the current tensions and ongoing conflict in the Middle East, this kind of served as a reset. So what do you think race is going to look like, Nelson, in Miami? Like, I mean, we don't really know for sure, but like what could you possibly anticipate here?
Well, Miami also wasn't on our radar as one of those energy-starved circuits.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that what the FAA and FOM have done now with this regulation set and modified it a little bit may not even show up massively in Miami, because Miami was always going to be a track where you wouldn't struggle per se to get as much energy as you need for the full lap. But for moving forwards in Montreal, if it stays dry in Montreal, is going to be quite an interesting one. Yes, there will still be some management. I hope we see less of it, especially in qualifying, because that needs to be an all-out full push lap. Otherwise, what's the point of calling it qualifying? And the main issue for me now is, do they have more room to fine-tune? They've gone this far, but is there more to come? And we all think we know what it means to go from 350 kilowatt from the battery pack to 250 or 200. But once we see it, we'll know better how it affects different cars, because what would work for one car may not work to an advantage of one of the other teams. So it is a big question mark, but I think it's more softening of the edges. We all got a little heated after China and Japan. Everybody was a little bit angry, and let's see if that continues in the next few weeks.
Well, as Toto Wolff said, now everyone famously quotes, act with a scalpel and not with a baseball bat.
Yes, which is nice if you're leading the championship by a country mile.
Yes, that definitely does help. Let's back up for a second here, Nilsson. Before we talk any more about this season, I'm very interested in hearing about your own personal journey. You developed a passion for motorsports, obviously, at a very young age. Your parents are extremely influential with that, but at the same time, you also kind of charted your own path. So, just talk to me, just to talk me through it. How did this start, and how did you become a motorsport commentator?
Well, so my father still raced when I was born. He raced on national, international single seater level. He did that until '89. I'm from '84, so I have vague recollections of seeing him race. And at that point, my parents already ran other cars, basically to sustain his own driving. And then they both gave up their day jobs and started a racing team, which sounds crazy if you just put it like that. So they did that in '89. And in a period up until 2050, they were quite successful. We were successful nationally, internationally, single seaters, but mostly what I think my parents are most proud of is launching careers. So they've launched careers of a lot of young Dutch drivers, international drivers. Zach Brown, famously one of those, who came through our team when he was a lot younger, when he was 18. So I spent every free moment either in the workshop or on track. And it, for me personally, was never a thing that I was going to race. It never entered my mind, but I was extremely happy to work in the race team when I got a little older, dealing with the drivers. Help you're dealing with 16-year-old kids who are doing a very serious sport. So keeping those a little bit under control, that's a thing. 16-year-old drivers. And just basic team management. Now, in that period, I didn't think my world would always revolve around motorsports, but thought, no, I really want to do journalism. So I studied journalism, and at that point, I was headhunted because one of the national broadcasters thought, well, he comes from the track and he's already studying journalism. Let's test him out. So I did a couple of broadcasts. One of my first was a champ car race, if you can believe it, um, and. And then I said, no, I don't. I don't think TV is for me. I didn't have the confidence to do it. Take something to listen to your own waffling all the time.
Mhm.
And but within a year, I really regretted that. And by chance, I came across the CEO of that company, and he said, "Well, come back. We'll have a talk." And when I came in, the contract was ready. I was ready to sign. So I started off at Eurosport with mostly motorsports, but after 2 years, I thought, well, I want to branch out. Can you give me another sport? And they gave me swimming, Olympic swimming, world championships, European swimming. Had a former Olympian as a co-commentator. Super enjoyable. And at that point, you start thinking, well, maybe I can do other sports. So I started doing tennis commentary. I started doing speed skating, which is huge in the Netherlands. Did a couple of Olympics, winter and summer Olympics. So incredibly fortunate in that. But motorsport was always my main gig because I'm a circuit kid. That's where I grew up. So a lot of 24 hours of Daytona, 12 hours of Sebring, Le Mans, Petit Le Mans, American Le Mans Series, IMSA racing, Dakar rallying. I even did Lore's off-road racing, stuff like that. Super enjoyable until at middle of 21, right in the Corona period, I was asked by Viaplay, hey, we've got the rights. We think you should be doing the F1 commentary. We want a new face, fresh face. We want duo commentary, and we want you to do it together with your regular co-commentator you do the long distance racing with, who happens to be a former driver of my parents, who happens to be my best friend. And now fast forward a couple of years and we travel the globe together.
And you guys go way back.
Oh,
We're talking decades here.
yes. We've been best friends for 20 years.
That's so awesome that you
Yeah.
get to do this with literally your best friend.
Yeah.
You get I mean that's really special.
Makes it a lot easier. And also when you spend so much time in airports or in rental cars, you tend, you know this, with your best friend, you have this language. You have this group of stupid bits of humor that have gone back for 2 decades as well. So nobody really understands that except for us. But yeah, it's a cool thing. It makes it a lot funner and easier to be able to do this with your best friend.
Mm. And out of curiosity, what was your favorite Olympic sport that you called?
Ooh, right. I would think swimming because it is a continuous build up, and then with 50 meters or 100-meter sprint you
Uh-huh.
throw it all out, and then 50 minutes later it's another medal race and another distance. So they were very challenging but a lot of fun to get the hang of swim commentary.
That's really, really cool. So let's go into like all aspects. This is something I'm very glad to have you on here. All aspects of the preparation that it takes to actually call a Formula One race. So, just for the audience here, we're recording this on the Wednesday prior to the Miami Grand Prix. I know you got on a plane yesterday, direct flight to Miami yesterday on Tuesday. Walk me through the whole schedule and all of the logistics involved up into the
So
race.
normally we would fly in on a Wednesday, but as from Amsterdam there are only direct flights to
Hmm.
Miami on Tuesday and Thursday. I got here a day early. Today is about preparation work. I also do a couple of big interviews this weekend, so I'm very fortunate to be speaking to Laurent Mekies, team boss at Red Bull, and I'm speaking to Colton Herta as he has an F2 home race here. So I'm preparing those. Uh, a lot of conversations with the editorial team in the Netherlands. Okay, we would like to film this. Can you make this news item? What do you think about this? And there's a lot of back and forth with a great team who really understands motorsport as well. So that's very enjoyable. And I tend to watch the day before we do commentary. So tomorrow I'll watch the race from last year just to get a sense again of what the situation is. Once you get into a season, you build up your knowledge from race to race. It's like your
Hmm.
internal data bank. So you will not see me with a huge folder around under my arms with facts and figures, but I'll have the basic ones, the ones that I know I'll need. I'll have them ready by Friday. And then you start to build your data bank for the weekend. Who's looking good? Who's struggling with what? A lot of coffee on track with a lot of teams to make sure that you know what's going on. When it's not a sprint weekend, I tend to watch free practice one, which I do not commentate on, um, either on track or in one of the garages in the pit box with the team headset on, listening to a driver and his
Okay.
engineer. Just to fill the data bank. And then Melroy, my co-commentator, and we start in FP2. And then you just build and you build up. You're very relaxed in the free practices. Qualifying is usually really tense and really fun. And then by come Sunday, you know in the back of your head that you know what you need to know for the weekend and to call that race correctly, because you've seen every meter that's being driven, every mile, every lap. You've spoken to everybody. You've in my case on Thursday I do press conferences as well, so you get a real sense of where everybody is. But that's all you can do. Then the uncertainty starts, and then the
Hmm.
commentary starts, and then you go with the flow.
How many so during the race day itself, how many screens are you looking at out of
Seven.
curiosity? Wow.
Seven.
Okay.
So I have a main, yeah.
Tell us the whole thing, the
Yeah.
whole layout.
So I have a main screen, which is world feed, which is to the exact time difference what you need to get the commentary on time in the Netherlands. Because if I would go and commentate the start out of the window, I'm 7 seconds early.
Got it.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's a problem. Very helpful though when you want to see who's preparing for pit stop, because you can just
Mm.
peek over your main screen. Now, then I have my laptop. I have another second screen on my laptop with facts, figures, stuff I need to have at hand, stuff that I've prepared, and then we've got either 4 or 5 screens on the side, 2 on each side, maybe 3, with live timing, but also sector times. We have the live radar to see where everybody is on track, because you see a yellow flag and you need to go with your eyes to that screen to know
Mhm.
immediately who's off, because the world feed may not have found it. And that's very important. And we have a tire screen to with Pirelli data to keep track of who's on which tire, how long have they been on there, which tires do they have left, stuff like that. Yeah, we work with Virtual Statman, a service that works with a lot of the commentators. And for instance, Verstappen does his 1,000 lap in the lead of the year. something like that, it'll pop up on my screen because it's impossible to keep track of that while also doing commentary. So your eyes are constantly darting, and when you do co-commentary, you're together. The art is it, then if I see Melroy's diving into a screen, my eyes are on the world feed. So one of us is always commentating from what the viewer will see. So if both of you are doing your own thing, I'm looking at a data set, he's looking at tires, and someone goes off, you miss it. So it is an unspoken relationship that oh, he's looking there, I'm looking there, or I'm looking here, so he's looking there. And you need to trust each other in that. And yeah, that's the process. That's how it works.
And you touched upon this in the recent episode of the Race podcast you were on, but if you could tell viewers here as well, the way you and Melroy work, it's a little different than the traditional commentary that most people would be accustomed to. So instead of it being like being like a play-by-play and an analyst, you both are kind of serving the analyst role. Could you just walk us through that?
Yeah, I've learned that it is different for us than for most people. When I would do swimming commentary, it would be play-by-play for me, and then all the analysis of what happened was for the former Olympic swimmer. But Melroy and I are both kids that grew up on track. We breathe, eat, live motorsport. So for me to only do play-by-play and leave all the analysis to him, it doesn't work for me, but it doesn't work for him. So what we do is you have the whole thing of the opening sequence, getting ready for the start, and then the start. That's all me. That I do. I cross the T's, I dot the I's. That's my job. But once the race is underway, we find that Melroy and I are almost 50-50 analysts and lead commentator. And it doesn't matter who gets the overtake or who gets the big crash. It is just the way it's going to work out timing wise. And then when we head to the finale, the final lap, I take over again. I start to what they call building a monument. Say it is George Russell's 10th victory or someone's first victory. You start building it up, explaining to people what it means, what it does for F1, etc. You put it into perspective, and then you head towards the finish flag. So the opening phase in the end, that's a lot of it is me, but in the middle, the biggest chunk of the broadcast, Melroy and I we're equals.
How do you feel about the graphics packages that Formula One provides? Do you want more information, less? What works best for you?
It works, and I must say F1 is very open to the conversation. So every year we have a couple of those sit downs. Okay, well, could we do this? Could we do this? Etc. But the main point is you need to be able to enjoy it if you're watching it from home. And if you're constantly searching for graphics, thinking, oh, what did he mean, etc., it needs to be low key enough for you to enjoy it, but you need to have all the information to be able to enjoy it. So that's the fine line. You can underdo it and overdo it with graphics very easily. The best graphics are the ones you register but don't think about. Because you have to read something while there's action on your screen. Well, it's never going to happen. Plus, you cannot read a graphic while you're using a moving camera, but it's been proven that people can't do that. So that is a fine balancing act that FOM has walked, and I believe they do it well, especially since they give us in the commentary booth more information, more context for us to convey. If we would put everything that we get on screen, there's no way you will be able to enjoy it.
Are there any circuits you find that are more difficult to call than others for whatever reason?
So I'm notoriously bad at knowing corner names, etc. I'll say this. I love the fact, and people may not notice it, but in the bottom right corner, there's always a turn count. And that has saved me so often. But Melroy is very good at it, so we complement each other in this. But tracks that make it very difficult, I would say Las Vegas, because you don't have a lot of points of reference. And it's all dark, and it's all shiny, and it's quite different.
And still relatively new, yeah.
Also that, but there's nothing that we just say, oh yeah, but that's that point, or that's that point. That's maybe a little difficult, but what they do then in Las Vegas is they lower the camera angles, so it doesn't matter as much. But But yeah, that and sometimes Baku can be a little bit challenging, Jeddah as well. So let's say the very fast street tracks are maybe a little bit more difficult, but I don't see it as a major hindrance.
Okay. What's your favorite circuit?
To work at or to call from?
Both, actually. As I said, I was going to ask you that. Yeah, both.
Well, let's say my favorite Grand Prix is Singapore. It is absolutely an experience working there. But from a motorsports perspective, you cannot beat Spa. You cannot beat Austin. People underrate Austin, but it's such a driver's track. It's so cool with the elevation. But by far my best day of the year is the Saturday in Monaco, because the qualifying session in Monaco brings out the best in the teams, the drivers, and in commentators, because you have to be on it so much. It is so important. With jeopardy, it comes excitement, and there isn't a place that brings more jeopardy in qualifying than Monaco. So, yeah, there are a couple of those that I really enjoy. Right now in Miami, I came here the first time and thought, wow, this feels very plastic with everything that we heard. I mean, we came here with pictures of a fake marina. I thought, oh, is it going to be like this? And it has become, I think after the first year already, one of my favorites, because you cannot beat the energy in the paddock. You cannot beat the energy that the Grand Prix brings. There's always something going on here in Miami. And I'm always glad to be here. So I have a few favorites for sure.
Well, that's awesome. So Ole, you were talking about, talking to a lot of people in the paddock, accumulating information prior to the race itself. How much of that information is true, or is it a lot of, fake news, kind of just like, little drips and drabs of information that might kind of take you in the wrong path? Just what's the gamesmanship involved here?
Well, so F1 paddocks, motorsport paddocks, are an echo chamber. And often what you hear with really simmering news stories, that it just originated from a conversation where someone made an assumption, and this get bounced back and forth. So it's not about the big news stories, but it's more about having a sit down with a team principal. And I'm lucky enough to lucky enough to be on good terms with most of them, to get a sense of where they're struggling. And but the big news stories, they will find their way anyway.
Okay. You good?
Yes, all good.
Awesome. No worries. Let's talk about this season again a bit more. So Mercedes now has pretty much jumped out to an early lead. Kimi has had a couple of good races, and he's ahead of Russell, but you could say that Russell has been kind of unlucky at this point when it comes to, car trouble of qualifying and some yellow flags. If you had to project ahead, we don't need to go all the way to, the end of the year here, but just like the next month or two, do you anticipate Russell retaking the lead here, or do you think Kimi can still maintain his ground?
Well, what goes for both drivers is that they will come to Miami willing to prove a point. Russell needs to reassert dominance, and Antonelli wants to keep ahead. What is very interesting is that feeling as, oh, this is my shot. I haven't been in this position before, especially for George Russell, having substandard machinery, non-competitive cars for a while now for a championship bid. And the big question is, does that mess with him? Does it mess with George Russell that he has to contend with someone that he had the measure of last year? And clearly Antonelli likes driving these cars. I still feel George Russell is a tad bit quicker, but in the scheme of things, it doesn't matter. Look at what happened at McLaren last year. Once you get two drivers feeling that it's between them and this is your shot, it becomes a situation that's very difficult to manage. But I would say look at McLaren, because McLaren showed signs of recovery, especially at the last race. That car must have undergone some more development as well. The biggest problem for McLaren has been the understanding of how to utilize all the software and hardware of the Mercedes power plant, as well as the Mercedes team does. And that's gains you can make with, that's knowledge. That's not development of the car. I think McLaren will start to put on some pressure here and there. I would be surprised if they aren't in for victories in the next few races. And that will change the narrative between George Russell and Antonelli as well. Because as long as it's the two of them, you can start taking risks. But we saw last year what happens when a third driver comes to play. And it's so early still in the season that there's plenty of time for that. That'll change things, especially if a bad qualifying means you're not second, but you're seventh. Then the pressure is on. So I'm really interested, especially for George Russell, to see how he deals with this pressure of feeling this is my shot. And then that little voice in the back of his head saying, it's slipping away from me. And that's what I'm interested in.
And perhaps some of the most intriguing racing that we've seen so far as well comes from Ferrari, between Hamilton and Leclerc. They had some very close encounters several times here, and credit to the team for allowing them to really race all out. Do you anticipate that to be the case moving forward, or do you think at some point the team's going to have to say, hey, guys, let's cut down a little bit on this? We don't need to repeat the Canadian Grand Prix last year.
Yeah, that moment between the McLarens in Canada. So for Ferrari, it's almost a no-lose situation because they're not quick enough at this point. We don't know from now, but up to now to really challenge the Mercedes drivers. So there's only upside for them to race. Everybody's happy that Ferrari is letting them race. They're still getting podiums out of it. They're getting the maximum out of it, allegedly. But now if McLaren has joined the party as well, that may change a little. But what will change it if it goes wrong? If those drivers go off, maybe here in Miami, whatever, if it happens, that changes the narrative for what's coming from the pit box, because that's the biggest no-no. But you can see it happening because Hamilton has a point to prove, and Leclerc is frustrated with the fact he's still not fighting for a championship. So those ingredients are there for a big battle or a big explosion. I'm very curious to see what happens.
How would you assess Cadillac's performance so far?
I'm very positive. I'm
I am
truly
too.
impressed. We know the 107% rule, which is there to make sure that teams that do a really, really, really crappy job don't get to the grid. And we also know how late Cadillac joined the party. They got the go-ahead 6th of March. Last year, 7th of March, which is exactly a year to the day before their first race. They don't have a big, shiny central headquarters. They're running from several positions. Now, if you add that all up and then you look at this season and think, I was in Bahrain for testing and I thought, this looks like a team that's been here for years. Yes, the car is underperforming. Yes, it doesn't have the downforce. It may be a little bit heavy, etc., etc. But in Bahrain, when they told me in Bahrain, first day of testing in Bahrain, that this was chassis number 2 and chassis number 1 had done the Barcelona test, I thought, okay, you guys are on track. Now, are they on track to score points this year? Of course not. F1 wouldn't be F1 if that were possible. But they need to be credible. They need to build a foundation for the next years to make big steps first and then smaller steps as you get to where you want to be going. We know how difficult it is. Look at Aston Martin. Look at what they've thrown at it in terms of manpower, big names and budget. And you can't buy success. So for them to first get to the finish with 1 car, then to the finish with 2 cars, then outperforming at least one other car in qualifying in Aston Martin, I think they should be very proud. But they can't be satisfied, because the moment you're satisfied with this, you're also not an F1 team. So very curious to see if they've brought some developments over the next few weeks and they can close up. But my main point is only 2 seconds of pole position last race. It's immense. I'm very, very impressed.
On the business side of things, do you have any sense of what the fan support of Cadillac is internationally at all?
Ooh, that is interesting. So I found on track quite a lot of people having Cadillac merchandise. And what I have also seen is that they have the goodwill factor. People are rooting for them to do well. Now, do they have the same footprint as a Ferrari or a Williams or a McLaren or Red Bull? Absolutely not. But I think in the eyes of the fans, I think the fans are happy that they're there. They're happy they've brought Bottas and Perez back to the grid. And I think the fans are happy that they're doing well enough to be able to root for them. It's not an embarrassment by any means. So I think overall it's a net positive from the fans.
Mm. Do you think at all that the F1 movie plays a little bit of a role there as well, since the whole storyline there is that there's a fictional 11th team, because that was back when there were only 10 teams in F1?
I don't think so.
No? Okay,
No,
just I don't know.
no,
Yeah.
I don't think. I think.
Too far of a reach. No, it's okay. No,
No,
yeah,
but
too far of
Cadillac
a
has
reach.
been very good at telling their story. They've communication-wise done a really good job. So I don't think that plays a part, but it is interesting how that mirrors it a little bit.
Yeah. So originally there were going to be 24 races. As of now, there are 22. As I mentioned earlier, again, both the Bahrain and Saudi Arabian Grand Prix did not occur in April as they were supposed to. When that announcement came out, Nielsen, it kind of seemed that Formula One was very careful in the way they stated what exactly was that announcement. And they kind of seemed to leave open the possibility that just maybe they could reschedule one or two of those races later on the season. There was a report from Spurtico about a week ago that said that F1 is considering having Bahrain slip in the week between Azerbaijan and Singapore. So that would be October 4th. Now, of course, this is up to a lot of different factors here, many of which are entirely out of Formula One and the driver's control here. Do you see any chance of that happening?
That's asking me
Mm-hmm.
to actually understand what's going to happen in the Middle East.
Yeah.
I think the biggest concern is getting your people there safely. F1 travels, basically the living circus that I'm part of is over to maybe 3,000 people. Getting them there safely, you're responsible for these people. Then also, if you then bring all your teams in, and what if their cars, their stuff can't leave Bahrain for a while because there's a flare up in the situation in the Middle East? You then put other races in risk. I read the press release in the same way you did. They left the door open. And I think that's for legal reasons, because the way I feel, I don't have any proof, this has worked out, is that the Saudi Arabians felt they maybe could have gone ahead. Jeddah was nowhere near where the fighting was. Maybe would have been possible, etc. So in this, you're looking for the word force majeure. So force majeure basically means there's no other way. We couldn't do anything about this. It's out of our hands. And I feel there may have been a discussion with the Saudi Arabian organizers, Aramco as well, that maybe it was possible in Jeddah. Now, I've heard also that they may go for a quadruple race at the end of the year. So then Vegas, Doha, Jeddah, and Abu Dhabi, and basically finishing up just before Christmas.
Which would be exhausting for everyone.
I can't imagine doing that. That triple header in itself breaks people. People are zombies when they are in Doha already from Las Vegas. It is too much. You're at the end of the year. Dug around a little bit, been digging. I don't think it'll happen, but we also know money talks in any sport, and if there is an opportunity to do it, they will. What it does mean for everyone is that they are actively looking at their 2027 calendar and how to structure it to be less vulnerable. But that's a whole different story.
Yeah, and there was a report that came out as well that it seems that for 2027, potentially Bahrain could be the first race instead of it being in Australia, which I kind of found interesting.
No, that's what I heard, because that was always going to be the plan. Because Bahrain,
oh, really?
Yeah, because Bahrain was always the first race.
It had been, I know, but it's interesting it's going back to it, though.
Yeah, because they went to Melbourne, which is logistically quite problematic if you're testing in Bahrain. They went to Melbourne simply because they couldn't hold it in Bahrain because of religious festivals, because of Ramadan. So that was the decision they made to go to Melbourne. But we were always under the impression that we would go back to Bahrain being the first one.
Interesting.
Current situation allowing, of course.
Of course, yeah. So we'll see what happens with those two races. It's estimated that if those two races do not occur, F1 could lose about $200 million. So, like you said, money talks, but again, there are many, many factors at play here, and the safety of everyone and the logistics as well. I mean, there's a lot of things to balance.
Well, a cancelled race while everybody there is problematic. If your cars are stuck there and they can't go to the next race, that's going to cost money as well.
Exactly, so that's a great point.
It's just problematic. But in the end, it's details compared to what the people in the region are going through.
Of course. Yeah, without a doubt. One thing I want to hear from you as well, Nelson, and you talked about this right from the start as well. You're working on some documentaries. I want to hear very much about this Dutch Grand Prix documentary.
Yeah. So when we heard that it was going to be the last one,
Hmm.
I probably was driving somewhere. I thought we just need to do something with this, simply because it is, for someone who grew up on on the track of Zandvoort, it was inconceivable to me that the Grand Prix could return, that F1 could come back to that track. It was old, it wasn't ready, there was no money. And then they still pushed forward with a plan and they got it back. And not only that, they changed the definition of what is an F1 weekend in terms of fan engagement and also logistics. People come on the bike and by train only. There are no parking lots at Zandvoort. You can't come there by car. So it's only trains or bikes, and it's 40,000 bikes that are there for that race day. And I think it would do Zandvoort a big injustice, the organizers, to not tell the story of how they clawed themselves back onto the calendar. So that's something I've been busy with basically since October last year. First interviews were done in October. A group of, I think I've spoken to 12 people now already for the documentary. And yeah, and the next one is next week. That's the final interview. And then we start editing. And then we hope to be ready at the beginning of the summer break. Um, Editing process will tell us how long it will be, but it's going to be longer than an hour, and we'll see what it's going to be like. But it is a good story, I can tell you, from what I've heard already from all the interviews. It's a story that defies belief.
Well, I'm sure the fans in the Netherlands will greatly appreciate that.
Yeah, it's good. And we spoke to Bernie Ecclestone. We spoke to Michael Masi for the FIA, who had to okay the track. Stefano Domenicali, but all the big Dutch players as well. It's a point of pride for me, that project.
Hmm. What are your thoughts at all about Stefano's recent podcast appearance on the race, which I'm sure you saw?
Yes, I have thoughts.
Yeah.
I think it was for a different audience. I
Hmm.
think also he's walking a very fine line. I don't totally agree. But I wouldn't. I'm not his core audience in that. I look at F1 as being from a very purist form. But when you are in charge of a sport from a business side as well, with investments, with bigger stakes, it is it's difficult to be aligned with how I look at the sport. For me, I just need the sport to retain its core of what makes the sport. And I made a comparison to, say you train for tennis, you train tennis, and you're good at tennis, and you work day in day and night to get to the US Open or to Wimbledon. And you get there, you qualify, your ranking's high enough, and you get there and you go to center court, and suddenly it's a padel court, or in the US a pickleball court. And they said, no, we changed it. But it's basically still the same. And it's great action. And then that is the problem I have with it. And I think he and I, from a business standpoint, wouldn't see eye to eye. Maybe from a pure standpoint, yes, but he has bigger stakes than I have. And he is looking at it from a global perspective. Luckily, I don't have to be the voice that changes the sport. I have the drivers in my corner for that, and they will find each other. The powers that be, with your biggest talent, the drivers, your biggest assets, they will force the sport into what I believe is the right direction.
Yeah. Again, lots of different aspects at play there. And we have to see how that goes. I again, like I said, I very much fall in line with you, Dilson, that there's potential here that you could alienate some of the purists, but at the same time, like I want to give this new rules regime a chance still, and I do commend Formula One for during this hiatus, taking a break and taking a self assessment here and saying, hey. Obviously, there's some few things we need to change, and they also seem to appear to be open to further changes, whether that's later this season or, as you said earlier, next season. That's definitely good to hear, at least.
Definitely, they are self-aware. It's
Yeah.
just um, it felt a little bit like the marketing line, so it wasn't meant for me, and that's okay. I'm glad we're in a paddock and in a sport where we can disagree.
Mm. Before we wind up here, let's also quickly talk about the Turkish Grand Prix. This had long been hinted at, and this has been in the works for a while, but it was officially announced just a few days ago that Turkey is going back on the F1 calendar. It's a 5-year deal. It's one of those circuits that appears to be one that people like a good amount. It had been featured a couple years during the COVID period, and then of course it went away again. Now it's coming back. What's your thoughts on that?
I'm happy that it's back.
Yeah.
Definitely. It is a pure driver's track. It was hugely popular with drivers as well as with fans. And look, um, from a location standpoint, where it fits into the calendar. This is an important Grand Prix to have, simply because it gives you the region where, if there are issues, you can always go to Istanbul. That's why I think it's imperative for this Grand Prix to be there. And it's just a good track. We need good tracks. It doesn't only need to be new street tracks, although they have brought great racing and have proved very popular. But it's good to have old school tracks. And Istanbul is one of those tracks that's both very modern and old school in its feel. So for me, that's just a sweet spot.
If you had to make any changes to the F1 calendar, what would you do?
Well, obviously, I'd hope for Zandvoort to retain its place, but they've
Yeah.
given it up themselves. Are we missing tracks right now? I'm not happy that we're losing Spa every other year because they're going to rotate. I wait to pass judgment on Madrid because that's one of those races I'm not certainly completely enthusiastic about yet, but it could be great. Is there a part in the world that we need to be racing, and that is logical to be racing? Maybe Kialami in South Africa. If you really want to call it a world championship, you need to be racing in Africa. Of course, they mentioned Rwanda, but is that really feasible and logical? The track in Kialami looks great. It could work really well. But with that also, you bring the wealthiest sport in the world to one of the poorest regions. And that is maybe something for everyone to think about as well. Yes, you bring business to the country, etc. But do you really help the people there? Can F1 change the world? That's another question. I don't think so. But to bring it back to your original question, is there a track that I really, really, really miss on that? I think Germany needs to be there. You cannot have Audi and Mercedes on the grid and not have either Hockenheimring or the Nürburgring on there. Germany needs to be represented.
You said you really like the U.S. Grand Prix in Austin. I do too, and of course you're calling Miami in the next few days. So if Austin's number one, which one's number two in the U.S.?
Oh, it would be Miami. Yes,
It's Miami.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Vegas is Vegas. It's not my favorite. It serves its purpose. But yeah, it is. It's maybe my least favorite of the three. I mean, I enjoy going to every Grand Prix, but if I could choose of those three, I'd always go to Austin.
Fantastic.
There's nothing like sitting on one of the embankments, or even from the main stands and watch. Not just an F1 car, but they've got great support series in Austin as well. It's, for me, from my age, I love seeing an Audi Le Mans car there on an F1 weekend. It's just, I love it.
And I mean, it's absolutely huge amount of fans that show up to that.
Great people there as well.
Astonishing.
Really nice people, well organized. Same here in Miami. Not only the attention of detail, but also just trying to help you out whenever you need some help. It's very nice.
Well, again, that race is coming up very shortly. The 5-week period of just waiting around is almost over. Fortunately, it's very much needed. It's been a long month. I don't know about you, but it's been a long month waiting for this to come back.
It's been weird to be at home for so long in this period.
All right. Well, hey, Nelson, thank you so much for coming on. This was extremely informative and fun. So greatly appreciate it, man.
Absolutely. No worries.
All right. Have a great day. Nelson was awesome, just as I knew he would be. It's once again for Jake's Takes. Couple of juicy topics here. April 1 marked the beginning of a new era for NFL Network as it officially became part of the Disney family. Founded in 2003, NFL Network was part and parcel of the cable TV boom and subsequent decline. The channel was involved in several prominent carriage disputes over the years, particularly with Charter and Time Warner Cable back when those were two separate companies. In order to justify its large fee, NFL Network over the years aired live NFL, college football, and even high school games. Even at the peak of the cable TV era, NFL Network was not as in many households as ESPN. Now, this led to a good deal of frustration for U.S. football fans. One extremely memorable game on the network was the 2007 Patriots-Giants regular season finale, which saw the Patriots go 16-0, have an undefeated regular season. New England won that game by a field goal, and they, of course, narrowly beat the team, which would end the Patriots' quest for a perfect entire season 5 weeks later in the Super Bowl. Tom Brady at the time set an NFL record for most passing TDs in the season. Randy Moss set an NFL record, which still stands today, by the way, for most receiving yard TDs in the season. The game was played on a Saturday night. Now, that was not flexed. That had been the plan all along. It had been set for that date months in advance due to a scheduling anomaly that had the Giants and Jets both hosting games that weekend in the same stadium. That's why NFL Network got that game. And because it was on cable, it was also carried on the Patriots and Giants local over-the-air affiliates. That being said, though, fans outside of those local markets who did not subscribe to NFL Network would not have been able to see this extremely hyped matchup. Pressure from politicians on both sides of the aisle resulted in CBS and NBC nationally simulcasting the game. Perhaps the two largest influences the NFL Network had on the league as a whole. Number one, it was the home of Adam Schefter, as he established himself as the premier insider covering the league, causing ESPN to poach him. And number two, the channel's launch of Thursday Night Football. TNF morphed from a small property into a ratings juggernaut, contributing to the league's 24/7, 7 days a week, 365 days a year news cycle that we have all become so familiar with today. CBS prioritized weeknight football so much that it shifted its extremely high-performing comedy series, The Big Bang Theory, from Thursdays to Mondays in order to broadcast TNF, which, of course, remember, NFL Network would still simulcast. CBS would subsequently split the Thursday Night Football package with NBC. Then in the next rights cycle, Fox took over TNF. Now, of course, Prime Video, Amazon, is the home of TNF. The draft. The 2026 draft here marked the first big event on the NFL calendar post this ESPN-NFL Network merger. ESPN has gone on record saying not many noticeable changes would be made to NFL Network prior to the draft, and so far that has proven to be quite accurate. That being said, some slight tinkering has occurred. Some of ESPN's United Football League game inventory has moved to NFL Network. There's also more cross-promotion and advertising of some programs between the two channels. On night one of the draft, and for one green room holdover on night two, ESPN's Laura Rutledge handled all of the on-site drafted player interviews. Now, this was a departure from previous years. Prior, ESPN and NFL Network would take turns conducting those interviews, essentially alternating back and forth with each pick. Kyle Brandt of Good Morning Football also joined ESPN/ABC on day 3 of the draft. With this acquisition, ESPN has absorbed the contracts of NFL Network's on-air talent. Now, of course, whenever there is an acquisition, there are redundancies. The indication is ESPN will honor the employees' existing contracts and then determine on a case-by-case basis whether to renew. Now, despite a budget and viewership that considerably pale in comparison to ESPN, NFL Network has done quite a good job establishing itself and establishing its own identity. Good Morning Football has served as an alternative to talk shows. Similarly, the evening program, The Insiders, blends reporting and analysis with a dose of comedy, all without needing to engage in forced hot take debates. It is my hope that insiders Ian Rappaport, Tom Pelissero, Mike Garofolo, and Judy Battista remain ESPN employees for a long time, as they all really do fantastic work and really have a great camaraderie. NFL Network's NFL Draft themed studio programming also has been top-notch. The Athletic's Andrew Marchand and Sam Farmer of the LA Times recently spotlighted Daniel Jeremiah, who's been pegged by several sports media pundits as a rising star. And respectfully to those people, Daniel Jeremiah is not a rising star. He has been a star for about a decade now. And NFL front offices think extremely highly of him. I know that for a fact. But I am glad that he is at last getting the public attention he deserves as well. Bucky Brooks and Lynn Zierlein, likewise, are spectacular. Now, of course, economic realities say ESPN isn't going to keep all of the NFL Network transfers. I mean, that's just not going to happen. Some in front of the camera and many behind the production of NFL Network programming undoubtedly will be let go. How will this channel operate moving forward? To what extent will it retain its unique branding and identity? What changes will be made to each channel's commentary teams? Will some NFL Network folks contribute to ESPN's college football coverage, perhaps? I could see that happening. Will NFL Network be mandated to embrace debate, to promote gambling? Maybe. Disney has a whole offseason to evaluate and implement their vision for their sister station. It may not be until August or September when the new season gets underway that we get clarity on this, but it's something I'm definitely keeping an eye on. Turning attention now to the ongoing Vrabel and Russini story, which has absolutely exploded with new revelations coming out seemingly every few days. This is a bad look for all parties involved. For Vrabel, for Russini, for the Patriots, for the Athletic, for their former employers, the Titans and ESPN, and for the league. The public statements Vrabel and Russini made on the matter have done them little to no favor and appear quite contradictory. Russini resigned from her position at the Athletic with just several months remaining on her contract. Vrabel in turn has said he is seeking counseling, and because of this, he wasn't at the Patriots facility for day 3 of the draft. Vrabel, for what it's worth, was photographed on Saturday in Utah. This entire narrative here makes absolutely no sense. If we take that statement as true, it flies in the face of logic. Vrabel could schedule counseling any day of the week. And like I said of Tiger Woods on this pod a couple of episodes ago, Vrabel can afford the very best. Certainly, he has the ability to choose his own appointments. Mike Florio of Pro Football Talk has posited Vrabel missing day 3 of the draft may actually be some sort of suspension imposed by the team and or the league. With Vrabel being MIA on day 3, he was not present for Nancy Meyer, the Patriots Director of Scouting Administration, who had been with the franchise for over half a century, make her final draft call. Over 50 years she had been there, and he wasn't present for it, which frankly rubs me the wrong way. By the way, day 3 of the draft took about 7 hours to complete, not to mention the additional time it takes to sign a bunch of undrafted free agents once the draft concludes. So that's one extremely long counseling session. Now remember, the Patriots are reigning AFC champions, and by the way, Vrabel is the reigning coach of the year. Even though New England were completely outmatched in that Super Bowl, they still just played in a Super Bowl. You can't fault them for that. They did it. And in the 2006 season, they are playing a division winner schedule with many high-profile games, unlike the cakewalk they had last year. So the NFL, as you well know by now, they customarily release the full schedule of dates, times, and networks in May. Usually it's the middle of May. Adam Schefter expects that to occur on or around May 12th to 14th. So here's a question. How many standalone windows will the Patriots have? How many 4:25 p.m. games? How many primetime games? The palace intrigue would certainly drive views and engagement, but this is, quite frankly, not a story the NFL wants front and center on a weekly basis. Looking further ahead, before the Vrabel-Russini story broke, the NFL made the real move in announcing the teams that would be involved in HBO's training camp edition of Hard Knocks for both this year, 2026, and next year, 2027. The Seahawks were picked for this year, and the Patriots were picked for the following year. Now, that seemed like a really good idea at the time to have the two Super Bowl participants be featured on the program. Now, though, it would not surprise me at all if a different team is selected for 2027. Of course, that announcement could come many, many months from now, but something, again, to keep an eye on. Now, this is all assuming, of course, that Vrabel still is the head coach of the Patriots, which is far from certain at this point. Remember, offensive coordinator Josh McDaniels has previously been a head coach twice, having led the Broncos and Raiders, and likewise was appointed the Colts head coaching job before backing out at the last moment. McDaniels has plenty of experience and could easily step up if necessary. Now, perhaps the Patriots wait to make a coaching switch until after the long-rumored A.J. Brown trade is completed, seeing as A.J. previously played under Vrabel in Tennessee, maybe not. Now, of course, A.J. Brown has very little say in the matter. He does not have a no-trade clause, so he can get traded wherever. This whole thing could blow over. Maybe not. And if no other salacious details come around, as time passes, broadcast windows and programming are unlikely to be changed, and Vrabel may very well be still sitting in the head coach's chair once September rolls around. But anything else arises, then all bets are off. At some point, the scale tips over. And that does it for this episode. As a reminder, recent guests on the pod have included Benjamin Robinson, analyzing NFL mock drafts using data science, Scott Friedman, talking the ticketing market for the Masters, Final Four, Super Bowl, and the World Cup, and Caroline Price discussing the latest developments in the ever-busy sports of figure skating and gymnastics. Those are all really good listens, and they come with my highest recommendation. Please subscribe, follow, and like this podcast on social media. Video episodes of this pod are available on both Twitter/X and YouTube. On Twitter, that's at Jake A. Klein, that is JakeAKline, and at Pathway to the Pod. On YouTube, that's at Pathway to the Podium Pod. You can also follow this podcast on Instagram and TikTok at Pathway to the Podium. Thank you so much for the continued support. Until next time.